Hi, it's Gilbert. Before we start the show, I want to let you know that we are going to be talking with the author of Project Hail Mary in an upcoming episode. I know that New York Times readers voted this book one of their top 100 books of the 21st century, and more importantly to some, there's a movie adaptation starring Ryan Gosling that's coming out in just a couple of weeks. So I'd love to hear from you. What questions do you have for Andy Weir, the author of Project Hail Mary? Let me know, and I may ask him your question when I talk to him. You can send your questions by email to thebookreview@nytimes.com. That is thebookreview@nytimes.com. You can also find a link to submit your questions in the show notes for this episode. And now, on to this week's show.
So I pitched this as a beach read, something that you could, if you have 2 weeks off or a week off, you can finish this book. The challenge was, I want a historian to read through that and go, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, this guy did the work. He did the work.
Were you worried about that? It's like, I have to
absolutely
get this right.
Worried. Absolutely terrified. Yeah.
I'm Gilbert Cruz. This is the book review from the New York Times. And today on the show, we're talking to first-time author Bob Crawford. Bob has spent the last 2 decades touring the country as the bassist for the band the Avett Brothers. Offstage, he's been obsessed with something other than music, American history. In 2016, he launched a history podcast called The Road to Now. A few years ago, he launched another podcast, a series dedicated to John Quincy Adams, the nation's 6th president and son of a founding father. And now, Bob has transformed his obsession with John Quincy Adams into a new book that is out March 10th. It's called America's Founding Son, John Quincy Adams, From President to Political Maverick. So deep inside your book, you make the following admission, which was somewhat frightening to me. I have spent hours of my life watching C-SPAN. I have to, are you okay? Is everything all right? Why?
You know what's
why
funny,
have you spent
Gilbert?
so much time watching C-SPAN?
I am not in this season of my life anymore. I am in the season of my life of hardcore parenting a special needs child, parenting a 14-year-old also, and then being in this band that travels a lot, and then doing 2 history podcasts. And, I'm in a different season, but there was a season in the mid-90s where I was in college. And in college, you have a schedule and it can be open sometimes. And you come back to wherever you live at this point and you lay on the couch, maybe for hours. I can't imagine what that's like anymore, Gilbert. I can't imagine that. And I remember in the mid-90s, we're talking Newt Gingrich era, the Clinton administration, laying on the couch, just watching C-SPAN for hours. And it would be like this soothing drone of constructive monotony. And so my C-SPAN watching days go way back.
You sound, with all respect, like the coolest college student I've ever
Yeah.
heard
Well,
of.
in fact, and then I'm just going to go a little further, and then because I can go down rabbit holes, so you really need to hold me to account here.
I will try my best.
But I was at the part of the college radio station, and we would go up late at night sometimes and go in, and it was just like reel-to-reel tape. And me and my friend, we would maybe we had we would go up there with our acoustic guitars, and we made a song about watching C-SPAN. And so I'm just going to leave it at that and let it drop there. So
I don't think I can let it drop there. What was the name of this song?
Oh, well, it was kind of this one line, and it was Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich, and that's I have the reel-to-reel tape. I don't have a reel-to-reel tape player. Maybe I need to send it into one of these one of these companies that kind of make those tapes audio. But if I do that, I will send you a copy of
Please
this,
do. I've been, I feel like the culture needs a new version of We Didn't Start the Fire.
It is kind of like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So you a lot of people know you and have seen you on stage as part of this band, the Avett Brothers. And it's sort of a funny reversal of roles. For a lot of people, cool dads in their 40s, noodling around on the guitar on the weekends, as sort of their hobby, the way they relax a little bit and sort of let their mind wander. You're a musician with this popular band, and you've made American history your hobby, your sideline. And I'm curious, what was the order of operations here? Like, what came first? Was it your interest in history, your interest in music?
Probably interest in history, because that goes back to, being 8, 9, 10 years old, going on family vacations and stopping at rest stops, and there would be a kiosk, and it would have all the local, like the little pamphlets of the historic sites that were nearby, and I would collect those. And so we would come back from our summer vacation, and I'd have 30, 40, whatever. I'd had many of them, and I would just lay them out on the floor and look at them. And I don't know. There was just something about there would be one, I can't remember a specific place, but there are these it would have these wax statues of a Native American, or, some painting of a battle on them. And it just kind of I was just captivated by it for some reason.
Is this because you had nothing else to do, or is it because there was something about
I'm an active person
at that age? It's this actually is genuinely interesting to me. I want to know.
It just was a comfortable place. And it is today. It's a comfortable place to go, and even if it's the subject matter is not comfortable, it's in fact, the subject matter of the book, it's very uncomfortable, and it's and we live in uncomfortable times. But the idea of going there sometimes can help soothe, or at least occupy, or redirect whatever's going on here. You know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I can imagine a scenario in which the present day is stressful, and therefore history is a thing that some use to take their mind away from what's happening now. Although, as you and many others point out, there are many echoes, and so you're never really away from the present.
No, but you're connected to what I've realized is, and I think that's kind of the point of this book, is that people haven't changed. I really feel like that's what'd you learn, Bob? Doing this, and I learned our technology has changed, but the human heart hasn't changed. The human capacity for greed or hate, or to do harm to another human being, or the human capacity to do good and to try to do better, that hasn't changed at all. And I think that there is something that connects us to people who came 50 years, we think about our grandparents' generation, and then we imagine our great grandparents, maybe we knew them, maybe we didn't, what was their life like? And then you can keep going back further and further, and we are connected to our past.
You talk about being in a certain phase of your life. In a certain phase of my life.
Season, right?
A certain season. We're in late summer, early autumn. I don't know, but we're both middle-aged fathers. There is a stereotype here of that type of person just really being into history, just want to read the hell out of American history books. But you've always been that way, it seems like.
Yeah, but it was never realized.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It was when I got into, I never pursued it.
So you became a musician, a working musician, a touring musician.
25 years.
25 years. So a quarter century of being a working musician. I'm curious, before we sort of talk intensely about JQA, John Quincy Adams, about how your interest in history sort of was bubbling out during particularly those early years on the bus or wherever you guys were using to tour. Paint a little picture for me. It's early days of the band, and you are in the back with a giant history tome.
Okay, so 2004, 2005, probably we're in Iraq. The United States is in fighting the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And at the same time, David McCullough, the I think he considered himself just a writer, but we consider him a historian. Put out these books, this John Adams biography and this book about the year 1776, right in that same time period. I think 1776 is when I really got hip to this. And so at one moment I'm watching, we're mired in the slog, right, of what became the Iraqi war. And on TV, there's images of prisoners at Abu Ghraib being forced into pyramids, like just being dehumanized by American soldiers. And then at the other channel, I'm watching David McCullough, probably on C-SPAN, talking about history, talking about American history. And he's doing it in a way that is very human, that really connects, like I talked about earlier, like how we are they and they are us, right? And he's talking about, like, you know, our American history. And I just love the way how eloquently and humanely he spoke about history. And so that's where I had this idea, like, wow, how do we get from here to here? Mm-hmm. How did this happen? And so I decided I'm going to read my way through it. Like, I read his books, and then I was set off, and I just started, like, devouring as many books about American history as I could to try to see if I could see a thread, like a line. And spoiler alert, there's not a line. I really see it more like an ocean. Like, American history is, like, deep and wide, and it's really complicated and complex, but there's no straight line, really. But that's what set me off.
So David McCullough, famed American historian, John Adams, 1776, but he's also writing about the Brooklyn Bridge. He's writing about
the Outer Banks
Roosevelt's
here,
years,
the Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers.
Yeah.
He really had a giant range.
Yeah.
And he's, for good reason, many people's sort of entry to this type of nonfiction writing. He also was a narrator on several Ken Burns documentaries. Where did you go after McCullough? And then how did that lead you eventually to starting a podcast? Are you looking on your shelves? Is that what you're doing?
I can go get it if you want.
No, Sean, do not stand up.
Sean Wilentz, like, the studio's like, what? Sean Wilentz, The Rise of American Democracy, Jefferson to Lincoln. That was the big turning point. Like, there's definitely, I wrote about this period, that, like, the period that he like really writes about, that just got me so. That's where you realize, oh, the characters, like, oh man, these guys they're the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just how, just like this, we have the Revolution and we have the Civil War. Well, the Civil War didn't just happen out of nowhere. Like, the echoes of the Revolution, and there's all these convulsions, and that generation leaves the stage, and they leave the stage to the next generation. And then the next generation, like, they don't have a lot of the ideals of the founding generation. Like, the next generation always messes everything up, like, it seems like. And, but this is where the parties come in. And this is, I mean, literally, this is where the parties, like,
the political parties.
Political parties are formed, and the infrastructure of a political party, and debates over the bank and the tariff and slavery. Mm-hmm. And so I found that period between Jefferson and Lincoln, and the way Wilentz is just this, when you read a book and it's just so deep. And I think this was like 700 pages. And
it's quite long.
It's quite long, but
book.
It is rewarding, and it is an encyclopedia of this time period. And so that was hands down the book that kind of put me on this path.
You've called that book, Sean Wilentz's The Rise of American Democracy, the pivotal book in your life. I think I heard you in one of your podcasts describe it as such. Mm-hmm. Other than introducing you to a period that you were not overly familiar with, and maybe many Americans are not overly familiar with, this period between the founders and Lincoln, was there something about the way that he wrote that spoke to you? I'm trying to imagine. It's my job to read, when necessary, 1,000-page books.
Yeah.
What was it like for you?
It was great because it's dense, but it doesn't read dense to me. Like it flows really well, and there are all these like threads and people where he brings them along to a point, and then you go to another kind of like subject theme, and then you're in another theme, and then somehow it is like multi-layered, multi-thematic, and chronological at the same time, which is really hard. Like that's the struggle when I was like trying to write, the book I wrote. It's like, how do I leave this guy and go to this guy and don't break chronology? Because Doug Brinkley, historian Doug Brinkley, I'm name dropping here. He told me that his mentor told him, abandon chronology at your own peril. And I always think about that line, abandon chronology at your own peril. And
chronology is your friend.
Well, Gilbert, I thought when I pitched this, I thought I would be put with a writer. To be totally honest with you, this was my vision, was that because I love research and I love talking about history and I love the scene, imagining like the scene, like, and at the moment, like when I was pitching this, I thought that I imagined, because my agent even said, well, they might want to put you with a writer. So I thought maybe they would put me with someone who what they do every day is write.
Mm-hmm.
And together we would write this book. But when I finally was offered to write this book, they were like, you're going to write this book. Like, no, you're writing this book. So I wrote the book. Yeah.
Did that freak you out? Did it make you nervous? Did you consider yourself a writer? And
like, I know there's a ceiling to my writing ability. Like I knew there was a ceiling because I've written little things here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So I did understand some writing, but I also understand that like, because I wasn't just like music, right? There's a language to playing music, and there's like all this basic stuff you learn. And then when you're performing music, the basic stuff isn't in the front of your brain, but it's actually controlling everything you're doing. So even if you're improvising, like Charlie Parker, the great jazz saxophonist, like you like learn everything and then forget it and go play.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is an element to that with music. And I imagine with any art, and I know this from Scott Avett and Seth being great painters and great visual artists, and they preach that all the time too. It's like you learn like to do the strokes, you learn like to do it. So I've never learned how to write technically, and I wasn't a great student. So even that, a lot of the basic stuff. So when I sat down to write the book, I just was like, I'm just going to write. I'm just going to write. And if I'm writing and I get into a quandary with like chronology or bringing in characters or going from scene to scene, I'm going to just write through it. And like, I just kind of convinced myself that the only way to learn how to write is to write.
I think that's actually kind of perfect advice for anyone who wants to write, whether they've never written before or they want to write again, is just to not let the act of trying to craft something perfect hold you back from doing anything at all. A lot of times the advice is just write it and you fix it later. If your writing is rewriting, the first draft is the thing that you just need to get down. And
editing is everything.
Yeah.
Editing, and I don't care what you're doing.
Chronology is your friend. Editing is everything.
Yeah.
After the break, Bob shares the one diary entry from the John Quincy Adams archives that he can't stop thinking about. Let's talk about this man that you spent so much time with. John Quincy Adams. He, to me, before reading this, was most famous for being the first president who was the child of another president. Obviously, to you, he was more interesting than that. And I think to readers, he will also be more interesting than that. When did you first realize that? What was it that led you to this man?
It was Walence's book, and realizing that after he was president, he went into Congress, which is happened one other time. I'm talking not being a congressman, and then becoming president. I mean, being president and then holding another office. The only other person who did that was Andrew Johnson.
Other than that being unique and rare, why else was that interesting to you in terms of sort of his journey?
Because to frame this in terms of discovery, in the Wilentz book, you're reading through and there's John Quincy Adams' presidency, which is not great. And then you keep reading and, oh, here comes John Quincy Adams again. He's in the house. And so like at every turn, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like this guy, son of the president. Okay. President. Okay. Well, that gets him in the history books. And then when you really dig into his life, and we love TV shows, movies, great novels, great books. We love the characters who make turns in their life. And you see, the deeper you look into this man, you see he makes this amazing turn, inside of himself. And then you get to his death, and that's the cherry on top of the sundae, because he has like the most epic death in America, one of the most epic deaths. Do
you want to briefly describe that death?
So he's been in Congress for 17 years. He's now 80 years old. He was against now we're talking 1848. He's against the Mexican War from the start. And so there's this thing they're voting on in Congress to commend certain generals, I guess. This is how I understand it, who fought in the Mexican War. And Adams he yells no, like against it. And then he's like getting up to speak. And the people notice like his hands are shaking and he's trying to hold onto his desk to pull himself up, and he falls over. And he big commotion, Mr. Adams is dying, right? And they bring in a couch and they put him on the couch. By the way, the couch is still at the Capitol.
Oh, wow.
And he's laying there and he's kind of like, he's in and out. And he says, "This is the end of earth, but I am composed." And he slips into a coma and he dies 2 days later in the Capitol. And as Sean Wilentz, when I did a podcast series about Adams, and Sean Wilentz was on it, and he said he dies with his boots on. And he literally, dies with his boots on.
That's how I would love to go out here at the New York Times, and like the earth is ended.
Like you're finishing up, you're writing an article, or you're finishing a podcast.
Like my final podcast here. I'm still 80, and I laid the stage for 2 days. Big life. So he had so many jobs. He grew up with a father as a president, as as is known. He witnessed the Battle of Bunker Hill. He was a diplomat. Talk to me about all of the research that you had to do in order to write this book, all the historians you had to tap, and then this unique or this robust archive that you were able to tap into of all these first-person accounts.
First of all, I read many John Quincy Adams biographies, right? So that's just basic there. But Adams, he did us all a solid, because he kept a diary from his teenage years until his death.
Mm.
And this diary I have read runs 14,000 pages. No, I have not read every entry in his diary, but I have read a lot of it that was pertinent to the story I told.
What were you able to actually learn from reading the actual words of John Quincy Adams, and how did that help you, put this story together?
My favorite diary entry from Adams is, I believe, November 2nd, 1837.
Off the dome.
Off the dome. And he says, "I was visited today by Mr. Thomas Munro, and he suffers from hypochondria. And he lost his son a few years ago, his grown son. He went to fight in war in Russia, and he got a fever and died. And then he lost his grown daughter, and his wife's not well. And he tells me, he comes to visit me. I guess Adams knew this guy for decades, and he came to visit him. And he said, my doctor says I suffer from the blue devils. have you ever suffered from this? And Adams, who had lost 2 sons, 2 adult sons, says, oh yeah, I know, I've suffered from the Blue Devils. What I do is, essentially says, work. I occupy myself with physical activity and mental activity. He's like, that's the only way you can fight off the Blue Devils. And I've suffered the Blue Devils. I've got some hypochondria going on, and I've had like some serious tragedies that we in my family we deal with constantly, and I find great comfort throwing myself into things like doing research, and so just that entry sums up why I love Adams so much. He's far from a perfect man, but he's so human. Like he's so like us. Like he suffered depression, and just the humanness in his diary. Not to mention like the actual historical narrative is just incredible.
You have been very open about your daughter's cancer when she was young, her treatment, her rehabilitation, her remission several years ago. And it makes me think what you just said, not necessarily the mean blues, but it's like you're reading this diary of someone who lived 160 years ago or whatever it was. And it's like, yes, this man also had concerns about his children and tragedies with his children and things that I can relate to in my own life and I can feel. And even though I'm writing about him in Congress and I'm writing about the gag rule and I'm writing about the Amistad, there's still this like personal connection in a sense that is always there.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And there are some months where he disappears in his diary. Like, and he was just suffering, he was going through it. And he talks about, and I point out in, I think, in the book, like where he's kind of like analyzing himself. Wow, I'm trying, I can't quote, I wish I could quote that one verbatim, but he's just kind of like, I've lost the things that I enjoy, I'm not enjoying right now. And I kind of feel sick to my stomach and I'm not sleeping. And he's just kind of like he's writing through, like a therapist will tell you this, right? To keep a journal, and he's kind of writing through his symptoms and he's realizing,
Do you keep a personal journal?
I have kept a few volumes that are from my daughter's like initial illness in that year. I have like incredibly detailed, great journals. And then I have years where it's just scribbles and scratches. In past several years, I don't. I've written a book about the most, like you could write a book about him as a diarist. Like he wanted to be a writer. He wanted to be a fiction writer and a poet and all these, there's a time in his life where he wanted to be an artist. And he never achieved that, but his diary is one of the greatest examples of writing in the 19th century. And these speeches and writings, his speeches are also, I think, are worthy of being thought of as being literature. But personally, no, I wish I did it more. I'm ashamed to be honest with you and tell you that I don't do it regularly.
The purpose of that question was not to shame you, so I free you from that burden.
I'm also raised Catholic.
Jinx. Coming up, Bob recommends some history books and shares the classic novel that he is reading for the first time. We're approaching the end of our conversation here, Bob, and I'd love to turn to our weekly segment. So the New York Times Book Review for more than a decade has asked authors, new and old, a recurring set of questions about their reading as part of a series that we call By the Book. And I have several of these extremely specific questions for you.
Okay.
Are you ready to answer these questions?
I will do my best to not go down rabbit holes.
What is the last great book that you read?
Here's the thing, and I know you're going to hate me for saying this, but when you're researching one subject for a couple of years, like you're just reading that. Like there's so many books that I've wanted to read that I haven't read. But I think I am in the midst of reading a great book right now, Moby Dick.
You're reading Moby Dick for the first time.
Yes.
That's so exciting.
It is exciting. It's amazing. It's actually amazing. Like when you read, like there are people who write history well. Like there are people who, Jill Lepore, okay? She's the best writing historian that hands down, like next to David McCullough, as far as writers go, like she is the champion. And her book, I've been reading her Constitution, her new book about the Constitution, which is incredible. Her These Truths is just, I recommend it to everyone who wants to learn about history because her writing is like butter. Like it is so smooth and so good. So I'm reading Moby Dick and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the prose, like sometimes I'm not even sure what he said. Like, I'm just like, but it's so pleasurable, and then there's like, then you catch this, like this small piece of knowledge, like in wisdom that you're like, oh my gosh, is this what fiction's like? Reading fiction? Is this what people bragging about reading fiction all the time?
Are you into the just overwhelming amount of detail about what whaling was like?
Well, but there's more. Like I'm 200 pages in, and so there's some of that, but just even Queequeg, his friend Queequeg, it's just the way he does that relationship. It's just great. It is beautiful. And let me tell you why I'm reading this book is because it came out, I think, in 1850. And this is like a time period I'm very fixated on. I'm very fixated on the 1850s. And I want to know, like, what were people reading and what art, like, I'm convinced you can get a sense of the period by the art, right? And this is, this book has become very relevant. I don't know how relevant it was when it came out, but yeah. So anyway, I'm finding great pleasure in that book, more than expected.
I'm thrilled to hear that. I myself had an experience with Moby Dick, I think during the pandemic, where I was like, okay, I'm finally going to read this. And it was a revelation. What book might people be surprised to find on your shelf?
I have a lot of theology books on my shelf. Like history, like I have gone through a period. I'm not there right this minute, but I've gone like I took theology classes online, like at one point, in my time here. And I have a great, it just means a lot to me. And I think so. I have like Thomas Aquinas's writings that might be surprising to some people because a lot of people are into like Thomas Merton or Richard Rohr or like what Mere Christianity, who is that C.S. Lewis. And I love all of that. But I'm reading Thomas Keating right now, who I think he was a Catholic as well. But like I even like the more dense, I can handle dense writing. I can handle it, but then you read a Jill Lepore or a Moby Dick and you're like, ooh, there's another world out there.
So the goals for you to aspire to as a writer.
Absolutely.
And then, okay, there's a key one here. What are some presidential biographies that you think everyone should read?
Well, I want everyone to read James Bradley's Martin Van Buren book because it is a companion. Like my book is like, it's all this time period, this important time period between the Revolution and the Civil War. And it is like the first like respectable, like, I mean, not even respectable, like it is literally the first real Martin Van Buren full-length biography that's come out in 40 years. Alexis Coe, You Never Forget Your First, about George Washington. And I think Lindsay Stravinsky, Making the Presidency, about John Adams. I think that these are books that people should read. I do love older presidential biographies. Like I think in the older history books, historians were more apt to let the quotes speak. You know what I'm saying? I think we technically, and I tried to use longer quotes. I think historians these days will be more apt to use shorter quotes, and then write their narrative around that. And I love these older presidential biographies. It seems like they let more of the actual people speak. I don't know.
I would like to let you speak one last time with this one last question, which is this summer is the 250th anniversary of this nation's birth. Yeah. It's our semi-quincentennial. It is a moment, of course, for the country, its citizens to reflect on its founding. As someone who's loved history your whole life, as someone who is, in a sense, professionally moved more towards thinking about history, writing about history, talking about history, how are you reflecting on this sort of impending anniversary?
I've been thinking about 1976. The last, anniversary was celebrated, and the country was in trouble. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. Like the time, like we're coming out of Watergate and Vietnam, and we are in dire straits again. So, different dire straits. But democracy is always in crisis. And so I want people to, if you don't know anything about American history, I want you to embrace this year, because there's going to be a lot coming at you. I would start with the Ken Burns series of the American Revolution series that came out late last year. I would also watch the Netflix series about Garfield, Death by Lightning. So as I reflect upon this, I hope this is an opportunity for people to get into the history, like get pulled in by something they see on television, and then go deeper. As far as what do I think of the anniversary, just based on the moment we're in as a nation and the challenges we face, nothing is ever inevitable. 300 years is not inevitable. 275 years is not inevitable. It wasn't inevitable in John Quincy Adams' time, and it's not inevitable now. So that's kind of how I look at it. Democracy is always in crisis. The future is always uncertain.
Bob Crawford, author of America's Founding Son, John Quincy Adams, From President to Political Maverick. Thank you so much for joining the book review.
It was a lot of fun, Gilbert. Thank you.
The book review is produced by Sarah Diamond and Amy Pearl. It's edited by Larissa Anderson and mixed by Pedro Rosado. Original music by Alicia Baitub. Special thanks to Dahlia Haddad and Paula Schumann. We want to hear what you think about the show. Send us an email at thebookreview@nytimes.com. I'm Gilbert Cruz. Thanks for listening.